what should you know about participating in clinical trials? I want to thank Lauren Simmons, who will be our first speaker, for bringing this topic to us. She was involved in a trial until very recently, and she said, you know, this would be something we really should talk about. And I agree, because a lot of people do not know how they can get involved in trials, why they should be involved in trials. I know that I haven't been involved in drug trials, I've been involved in other studies, but many clinical trials do not finish because they can't get enough people to sign up for them. And I'm sure the Dr. Siderowf will talk about that. So Lauren is going to be our first speaker. She's going to talk about her experience. And then Susan Lehman, who many of you know, is going to talk about her experience. And she's been working with the doctors at Penn and recently came off of a trial where she was working with Andrew Siderowf and Ellen Indik at Penn. So we are going to have Lauren speak first, Susan, and then the doctor, and then Ellen. And let me just tell you a little bit about them. Lauren lives in Orange County. She's Orange County, California. She was diagnosed 5 years ago. And since then, she's become a rock steady coach, a support group leader, founder of PD Buzz, which is a fabulous website, a resource website for people with PD in Orange County. And she's a fierce advocate for herself and others with Parkinson. Susan is all over the place with us. She's one of our leaders on the our mentor program, and she's been an invaluable help to me. She's a professor of drama, correct?
And, well, I retired, but yeah.
She's retired. And anyway, so that's Susan, and then Siderowf, MD, is the professor of neurology and chief of the movement disorders division at the Penn School of Medicine Department of Neurology. And he focuses on diagnosis and management of patients with Parkinson's disease and related disorders. And his research encompasses the organization and conduct of clinical trials, particularly the use of biomarkers as outcome measures. And he's got many more credentials. I'm not going to go into it because we have limited time. I'm sorry. And Ellen Indik is a clinical research coordinator at Penn with 17 years experience, the last 3.5 years in the Parkinson's disease and movement disorders clinic. And she has a master's degree in healthcare administration. So I want to welcome all of our speakers. I'm going to take this screen down and I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
Okay, Sharon, can you mute everybody? There's a lot of background noise.
I'm going to mute everybody, yeah, because it is, okay, now I need to find you, Lauren, and take you off mute. I think you can do it.
I think I'm off mute.
Yeah, you're off mute. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
You know,
all right.
We're still hearing it. I don't know who it is. Oh, not everybody muted. Okay, let me try again. Let's see. All right, now.
Okay.
Now, okay.
Good to go?
Yeah, that's better. Okay, so let me pin you and, okay, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Lauren Simmons, and like Sharon mentioned, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 5 years ago. Since that time, I have tried to really keep up to date and educate myself on the research that's going on and clinical trials that are going on. I attend a lot of online seminars and things like that to know what's going on, to see if there's something that might benefit me. But until about 6 months ago, I didn't actively participate in the clinical trial. I had participated in questionnaires and surveys and things like that, but I hadn't actually participated in a full-blown trial. And boy, did I jump in head first to the one that I jumped into. But it was a really good experience. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk, that I suggested this topic to Sharon, because I really think that it's something that as people, you know, who are living with Parkinson's, I think it's to our benefit to participate in these trials. I can't remember which doctor I heard say this, but I did hear someone say that research will not progress without the active participation of the people with the disease. Because if they can cure Parkinson's in a mouse, that's great for the mice, but it doesn't say a lot for the people living with the disease. So at some point, they've got to involve the people living with the disease. So about 6 months ago, I attended a seminar online. It was researchers from UCSD, and they were talking about a subcutaneous levodopa trial. And I had heard about this study before. I had even talked with my neurologist about it. She thought it might be something that would benefit me. So I decided to pursue it. And I talked to, that was back in February. In March, I had my first meeting online with one of the research associates, and they just kind of gave me the overall basics of the study, how long it was, how much time would be involved, you know, all the things that I would have to do. And they wanted to, it was a pump, think of like an insulin pump for diabetics. It's a pump like that for people with Parkinson's. And the drug that it was administering was carbidopa-levodopa, which is something that I am already on. So it wasn't like I was trying something that's brand new on the market. It's something that I've been taking for years and I respond very well to. So I had my first meeting with them online. I decided to pursue it. I started probably the middle of March down at UCSD, which is about an hour and a half drive from my house. So this was a significant time commitment that I was going to be putting into this trial, but I was super excited about it because I was at the point where my medications were wearing off like every 3 hours or so. So I was having to take my Sinemet all throughout the day and adjust my diet, and just lifestyle wise, it was difficult to have to take meds that often. And I was having a lot of off time. So I started down there. The process, I had to go through all sorts of neurological testing, you know, blood, urine, EKG, medical history. I had to do a ton of those Parkinson diaries that many of us have had to do for our doctors. I had to be trained on the pump and on administering the medication and how to store the medication, how to make sure I didn't get infection. It was a very, very involved study. I had a home health nurse come to my house to train me on the pump. I had to pass a test. Then after I passed the test, I had to get optimized on their carbidopa-levodopa, the manufacturer that they used, because in this study, I was going to be taking pills and have the pump, and one was going to be placebo, and I didn't know which one. So I finally got the pump on June 10th. I was super excited about it. I couldn't wait. I thought it was going to be awesome. And then I had issues from day one. I got bruising, I got swelling. I stuck with it as long as I could. I have to say, for you guys who have heard about this delivery method for the medication, there's a couple different studies going on. When it worked, it was a smooth ride. I am very sure that I did not have placebo in the pump. I think I had the real thing. It was really good. I could go for 12 or 14 hours with no off time. It was wonderful, but it's in a clinical trial, so they still have things they need to work out. I am very, very active, and I thought I was going to be able to wear the pump for my exercise, and that was one of the issues that I had. But about a month, I was supposed to have the pump for 3 months, and then after that, I could go into the extension trial, and then I would know for sure that I was getting the real thing in the pump. So even though I had the real thing in the pump, I know I did. I mean, they haven't told me, but I know that I did. But anyway, I was supposed to have the pump for 3 months. After a month, I was having a really, really hard time with bruising and swelling. And the primary investigator on the study recommended that I discontinue. And I was really disappointed, but I think I was kind of ready to be done. I had invested a ton of time in this. They had invested a ton of time and a lot of money in having me as a trial participant. But my takeaways were, even though I was not successful in completing the trial, I think they learned something from me being in the trial. They learned that, you know, the way that they were administering the medication with that particular device and all that may not be the best for people that are real active. I'm only one person, but, you know, possibly other people in the trial had the same thing. So I'm sure that they learned things about that. Also the fact that when it was working well for me, I was measuring all my on and off time and all that, and I did really well with it. I think this is going to be a really good treatment for people with Parkinson's in the future. What else? Another thing, if you're going to think about getting into a clinical trial, I would say be prepared for unexpected outcomes, because I thought this was going to be awesome and the best thing ever, and I'm successful at everything, and it just didn't work for me. So that was difficult, but like I said, I learned things from it. I think they learned things from it, so it's all good. The other thing I would recommend if you're going into a study is ask a ton of questions before you get into it. The one that I got involved with was very, very time intensive. There was a lot of things, a lot of documentation that I had to do. I was very willing to do it, but just go in with your eyes wide open and ask questions at the beginning, because you don't want to be frivolous with their time or your time. I would just say, you know, once you make that commitment, try to stick to it the best you can. But I would highly, highly recommend that you look into clinical trials, because as Sharon mentioned, and I'm sure the experts can tell us, a lot of trials don't get done just because they don't have enough participants. And Michael J. Fox said, a cure isn't going to fall down from the sky. We're going to have to climb up and get it. And I feel like this was my chance to climb up a little bit and try pulling it down a little bit. So if we all climb up and do our part, hopefully we'll get it. But do your research, be aware of what's going on in your area, because there's a ton of clinical trials out there and they're not all right for everybody, but I would say definitely look into it because it'll benefit all of us. That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great. Susan, tell us, you need to unmute yourself, and I'm going to change.
Yeah. Lauren, Lauren was very brave to do what she did. When they said knowledge is power, her experience with the trial not working out is as much knowledge. It is knowledge for the doctors, no matter what we do. If something doesn't work, that means, okay, then we move on. But they don't know unless we help them try. My motto is, if we're not part of the solution, I stay part of the problem. And I want to be part of the solution. And most of the things I do, it's sort of like what I've always tried to do. But I don't want to stay part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. I don't need to talk about my personal experience because I can do it at the end. I've been in a lot of different, this is my first drug clinical trial, but I've done the lumbar and I've done blood and I've done observation and I've done a trial from the University of Rochester. I'm in so many of these surveys and trials and observation things. I really can't count. I just know there's a survey every month I'm filling out. But for my clinical trials, I like to stay home base. I just told somebody at the Cleveland Clinic I wouldn't be doing their trial. I didn't want to travel, be so far from my home base of University of Pennsylvania. But I'd like Dr. Siderowf to talk about the trials more. Oh, and I was just in a year-long Newly drug trial. And the one thing I will say is, the good news is I think it works. The bad news is the drug is no longer available to me. So it's a little like Flowers for Algernon. If anybody remembers that short story or movie Charlie, it's sort of like afterwards you have to deal with the emotional turmoil of not being in the trial anymore. And that's okay, because I'm still part of the solution. And that's what Lauren had to deal with. Emotional trial of it not working, or the emotional letdown of, gee, my symptoms are getting worse because I'm no longer on the drug. And, then I can say, well, I had a year of extension because of it. You can find something bright about it no matter what. Okay, Dr. Siderowf, I don't want to take any more time because you're the master. Flattery will get me nowhere.
Yeah. So thanks, Susan, and thanks, Lauren, for sharing your perspective too. I think that Ellen is going to talk a little bit about her experience because she works directly with patients in the trials that we do at our center. And I just wanted to pick up on a few of the themes that Lauren and Susan had mentioned. I guess I wanted to start with like reasons for being in a trial. And in my way of thinking about it as a doctor taking care of people with Parkinson's disease, it's very, very common to have patients who sign up to be in clinical trials to get treated themselves because they think this is a sort of a way to jump the line and get treated with something that's going to be great that's just not available to the general public yet, and sort of like be an insider. And I think part of that's true and part of it's not. I mean, it's possible that whatever the experimental treatment is in a trial is going to really be very good for people with Parkinson's disease, and it is a way to get it sooner. But we don't know that these drugs work yet. They're experimental by definition. And so the idea that you would be in a trial just to sort of get something that other people can't get, and because we know that it's going to work, get the cure first. It's not true. It's not like, signing up for the COVID vaccine in January where you sort of, it's already been tested. It's just a matter of like scarcity and you get it early in the line. This is research. It's not treatment. And the other thing is almost all trials, all reputable trials will have a placebo. And if you're being put in a trial that doesn't have a placebo arm, you should really ask yourself, like, what is anybody learning from this trial? And is it just marketing, or is it really testing a new drug that could be helpful for people with Parkinson's disease? So the drugs are always unproven. That's the sort of the nature of trials. If they were FDA approved, they wouldn't be a trial. And there's almost always a placebo. And it's really important to not confuse treatment with research. So that sort of like sounds like sort of throwing cold water on it, but really it's not. I just want to just echo what Susan said. It's so crucial that patients with Parkinson's be part of the solution, that they participate, that you all participate in trials and help move the ball forward so that people like you, and probably yourselves actually too, because this is it's a chronic disease that goes on for years and years, obviously, can benefit from the knowledge that we get from these trials. And I would say this most recent batch of trials, I hear good. I think that some aren't so good, but some of them, I think the patients are actually doing well in them. And I think that these things have a decent chance of turning into the next, not next year, but in like 5 years, because the process is painstakingly slow. They'll turn into the next wave of therapies that we can all benefit from. Susan, should I keep going?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to talk for about another 8 minutes, something like that. I'm not going to, and then I think, because you want to have a discussion, right? Yeah. All right. So reasons for participating in trials, just to summarize this point, it's not to get treated, although there is that, and there is, if the drugs work and you get assigned to the active treatment group, there is a chance that you're going to benefit from drugs that aren't available on the market yet. There's absolutely that is definitely part of the reason that people are in trials. But I think the other part, which is just as important, is the altruism part and the advancing science part. And we're all in this together, and it's so important for us all to fight against Parkinson's. Otherwise, it's going to win. And so the being part of the solution is, I think, the really the main reason to be in trials. And the chance that you're going to get something that's going to help you is kind of, it's important to patients, no doubt about it. And I think a lot of people are trials because of that. But to me, it's really icing on the cake. And I guess the take home here is that it's a really good thing to do. And if you get the chance to sign up to be in a trial and it makes sense to you, and you read the consent form carefully and you, the risks and benefits lay out in a good way for you, I would try to say yes if you could. I wanted to talk about a couple other things, I guess. I want to talk a little bit about the types of trials that people can be in. And Susan sort of alluded to a little bit. I'm going to break it down into, there's a bunch of different kinds, but I'll break it down to maybe 4 kinds. There are really just observational trials, like filling out surveys or being in registries that they're not invasive at all. And I think you all get sort of asked to do this. The Fox Insight's an example of a national survey. You probably have surveys that you do it wherever you get your Parkinson care. So that's one type. It's not interventional, it's just observational. Then there are interventional studies that are, or I guess I would say invasive studies that are still observational. And these would be studies where you give a blood sample or maybe a spinal fluid sample for genetics or for biomarker research. and in concert with that, you provide, either you get examined or you do surveys. And the PPMI study is an example of this. Really important for understanding the natural history of Parkinson's disease, understanding how people with Parkinson's are different from each other, understand how they're the same as each other, and connecting the dots between how the symptoms present and what the underlying biology is. You might get asked to be in a brain bank, one of these studies where you sign up to, during life, to fill out surveys and answer questionnaires and maybe give a blood sample and then donate your brain to a local pathologist after death. This is also incredibly valuable, and some of the most important research that's come out of the labs in the last 20 or 30 years has been due to these kinds of brain bank studies. So also a really good thing to do. And then I was going to sort of break out the last two kinds. The third or fourth kind would be interventional studies. These would be drug treatment studies, either drug treatment or sometimes it's actually devices like deep brain stimulation trial. And I would break these into two things. One would be like what I would call discovery phase, which are sometimes the drug companies call these phase 1 or phase 2. And these could be like first in human studies where the drug hasn't really been tested in a lot of people yet. And the idea is to see if it's safe, what the right dose is, and what the spectrum of possible side effects are. These are oftentimes very intensive where you have to, come in frequently, maybe even stay overnight, oftentimes do a lot of scans or give a blood sample. And these are really important so the companies or the universities or the scientists who's ever developing this particular therapy knows how to use it in bigger trials. But it's a lot more work for the patients. And sometimes the trials are fairly short, 2 months of exposure. And so it seems, and there's a lot of work. But they're really important. If you get a chance to do this, I think we do some of them in our center, and I think people who do them find them very interesting. They really feel like they're getting in on the ground floor of science. It doesn't really feel as much like you're getting treated yourself because the period of exposure is fairly short. One good thing about them is they usually have relatively limited placebo because they're really trying to understand about what the drug is like in terms of the doses and the potential side effects. So usually it's sort of like a 6-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio of people getting treated to people getting on placebo. But the treatment is short. So those are what I call discovery phase. Drug companies sometimes call them phase 1 or phase 2. And then there are what I call the confirmatory phase. And these are what the drug companies often call phase 3 studies, the big studies that are designed to show the FDA the drug is safe and effective and they can be approved. And these studies usually are big. They involve hundreds of patients usually, involve multiple sites around the country. And they usually involve a higher ratio of getting placebo, usually 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. So there's more of a chance of getting placebo. But these studies are really designed to confirm that the signals that suggest that the drug might be effective in the early phase studies can be confirmed in what we would call a phase 3 study. And these studies are usually longer, a year. They oftentimes have an extension afterwards, so they'd be a year, and the people who are on placebo would get treated with active drug in the second half. And these drugs have already been tested fairly extensively early on, and you wouldn't be the first Parkinson patients to get these drugs. So we know something about the safety. We know something about the doses that you're going to get. And so usually this is a lower risk activity. You're unlikely to get something that's really likely to have unexpected side effects because that's already really been tested in the early phase studies. And the drugs are closer to getting approved. The main downside to this is that there's a higher chance of getting placebo, but these are the studies that the drug company is going to take to the FDA. So they are long and they have a large sample size so that they can really tell for sure the drug works. And again, it's very valuable. And participating in these studies is also really important because this is the crucial data that takes the drug from the experimental phase to the drugstore, basically. And so all these 4 kinds of trials, the non-interventional studies, the observational but invasive studies like PPMI, and then the 2 different kinds of clinical trials, where the drug testing studies, the early phase and the later phase studies. These are the four basic kinds. And I think they're all very valuable, all part of the process of finding a cure for Parkinson's. And they have different pros and cons, different sort of asks of patients. But if you get offered any of these, I think I would read the consent form carefully, talk to your family. And if you think you could do it, try to say yes, because it really does, it moves the needle forward. It helps you, it helps people like you in the future. And this is how we're going to beat Parkinson's.
And-
And then, okay, yeah.
No, I was just going to say something, forgive me.
No.
But you mentioned something about, we've talked about this in the office, about being people who think they're jumping the line. I mean, you do trials for yourself because you hope it works, but you do trials because 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, it may work, and then it is for you. But you don't necessarily know right away if it's for you, but it's all for you. Even Lauren's difficult situation is for you personally. It just may not be for you right now, but it may be for you a year from now or 2 years from now. So it's not all, it's 50% altruism, but it is 50%, I'm going to be the beginning of something, gives your life a sense of purpose. If things are taken away from you, you have more purpose in your life when you're moving research forward. And what the hell better do I have to do? Kind of thing. Sorry. Go on.
No,
Andrew.
thank you. Those are really good points. And I think I sort of try to kind of draw a pretty, clear distinction between self-interest and altruism. But really, it's not this is your community. I think that what Susan's saying is actually potentially you in the future. So it's not really pure altruism. It's not like, donating to your Christmas fund in the office or something like that. This is a chance to make a difference in something that you really care about, that you're invested in, that affects you. So absolutely true. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just a little bit about resources. So there's a government website where all reputable trials are listed, called clinicaltrials.gov. And you can go and type in the keyword Parkinson's, and you'll see lots and lots of trials. If the trial that somebody asked you to be in is not on clinicaltrials.gov, I would be very skeptical about that. Anything that's above board, at least you should ask. Some companies don't put their early trials on clinicaltrials.gov to protect trade secrets, but it's pretty rare. And the big companies almost always have their trials on clinicaltrials.gov. So if you can't find your trials on clinical trials, if somebody wants to do something that doesn't sound quite right and you can't find it, I would be really skeptical. It's something you should definitely pay attention to. The other thing is a website on the Michael J. Fox has called Fox Trial Finder. It's like eHarmony for Parkinson patients and trials. And you can look, and I think the way it works, although I've never done it myself actually, is you can type in some features about yourself and it can tell you what trials you're eligible for. I think it also has a feature where you can just scroll and look at all the trials that are out there. But these are really good ways to find trials. And the certain sense there's word of mouth. You can definitely ask your doctor what they're doing at the site where you get your care. But I think that I really do recommend the Fox Trial Finder, and I think that it's not a terrible idea to go look on clinicaltrials.gov if it's a very small sponsor, or that it's not like sponsored by like Roche or Pfizer or some big company that's reputable, but it's a small company and you're not sure how solid it is. It's definitely worth asking. Our site, we pretty much say no to things that we don't think are going to be good for our patients. But sometimes it's well, we don't. I think that we can tell, but it's a good idea to check. And I guess those are the main things I want to talk about: the reasons, the types of trials, and some resources. And I guess I'll just wrap up by saying that, as a doctor who does clinical trials, I'm eternally grateful to people like Susan who step up, and Lauren who step up and say, okay, I'll give up my Tuesday afternoons every 6 weeks and come and answer surveys and do questionnaires. And because without you guys, we can't do better for our patients. And it's you guys are in a unique position to help, but also, a unique position to like be asked to take on risk that you don't necessarily want or need. And so when you step up and do this, you're really helping, and you should, you're heroes in a way. I mean, it makes a big difference. Susan, you're like a minor hero, not like,
I
yeah.
have one quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do you recommend talking to, I assume everybody should speak to their doctor first before signing up for a trial, just to make sure that.
Definitely. Yeah. Talk to your doctor, talk to your partner, your spouse, talk to your kids. You shouldn't like do it if you don't want to, but if you're sort of on the fence, I kind of say, well, think about how much good you're going to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm going to
Ellen.
make a plug for a couple of specific things. So the Fox Foundation is just a game changer for Parkinson's care. I think other foundations too, like the Parkinson Foundation out of Miami, also makes a huge difference, especially in the genetics efforts they've been doing the last few years, and their patient-oriented efforts to really for like caregiver support and that sort of thing. But the Fox Foundation does a lot of research that has to do with causes and cures, and their centerpiece study is called Parkinson Progression Marker Initiative, PPMI. Are any of you in PPMI? You are? Yeah, good. So PPMI is relaunching a second panel of patients this year. And the patients are being asked to do basically the same stuff they were asked to do last time around, which is a lot of questionnaires, a lot of DAT scans, and an LP, lumbar puncture, I think every year. And this is an observational but invasive study because of the LPs. They're enrolling several groups of people. They're enrolling patients who are recently diagnosed but haven't started treatment yet. They're enrolling controls, people that don't have Parkinson's, so maybe spouses, what have you. They're enrolling people that have been recently diagnosed and know they're carrying one of the two main genetic mutations, either the LRRK2 or the GBA, or both. And they're enrolling people that are at risk. So this is people that either have REM sleep behavior disorder, have a really terrible sense of smell, or have a first-degree relative that has Parkinson's. If you know people who belong to these groups, and you get a chance to mention PPMI to them, it's a really good thing to do. So I just wanted to put in a plug for PPMI because it's just starting to re-enroll now, and it's been a game changer for Parkinson's, and this new wave is really important too. So a little shameless advertising, but this is, I think, the study that's top of mind for me right now. That's a observational study.
I want to say something about the lumbar puncture because I don't know how many of you have had them, but they have a really bad rep. It's like it's not my favorite thing to do. It's not like, hey, gee, I want to have a good time. Let me get a spinal tap. But it really isn't that big a deal. And I have to have it with the ultrasound too because I have scar tissue. And it's like I don't like, a dentist is worse. Even with the Novocaine, really wasn't that big a deal because a lot of people say, "Oh my God, it's so terrible," and go, "No, it's like 5 minutes, and then you have a little sore back for half a day, and what better do I have to do?" Kind of thing. Part of the solution or stay part of the problem. So I'm really, it's a decision you have to make, but I think it has a really bad rap, and it doesn't deserve it. It's uncomfortable. It's not fun. It's not terrible. The other thing I want to say about being a participant. People are so nice to you. Andrew and Ellen would never be this nice to me if I wasn't a participant because it's true. So anyway, so I did want to mention that about if you're going forward with a lumbar puncture and they're talking about it. Don't listen. It's not fun. It's not the day at the beach, but it's not a terrible, terrible thing. And I've had a couple now, and it's not a terrible, terrible thing at all. It's like, the dentist is worse. Anyway, Andrew, do you have more? Or should I turn it to Ellen for a few minutes?
I'm good.
Ellen, speak to us. You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. I think you've all been great speakers. I'm going to just elaborate on a couple of things. Both you and Lauren and Andrew have spoken about, you know, why volunteer? Why be part of something greater than yourself? There's always the little bit of the self-serving piece, you know, maybe this will benefit me. But as you all said, you know, perhaps more importantly, it might benefit people with Parkinson's as a whole, you know, and quite honestly, the altruism feels good, and it feels good to be part of a mission, you know, to work for the greater good. So there is really something to be said for that, and there is a purpose, and we are nice to you. So and it becomes sort of a self-selecting group. It's people, you know, the studies are successful for so many reasons because we have participants who understand this and are willing to go into this and give up time and give up, you know, their resources and drive an hour and a half and, you know, do the lumbar puncture and stick out their arm yet again for more blood or have another DAT scan. And I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate it. So you mentioned volunteering, and you know, it's voluntary. I tell everybody that it is completely voluntary. You're given a consent form typically in advance. And like Andrew said, you go over it with your loved ones, you review it, you ask when you come in for your first visit, your first study visit, you ask a million questions and make sure you're given the time. And you, of course, you don't go into it thinking, gee, once I sign this, you know, I can change my mind in 2 minutes and I'm done. Or I'm going to go into this and see if it works, if I benefit from this. And then 2 months later, I think I'm just going to drop out. It's really a commitment, and there's responsibilities that we have to you and to follow a study, what's called a protocol. You know, it's an exact schedule that we have to stick to, and the schedule is developed to produce, you know, good results, good quantifiable and qualifiable results. So it's a commitment to you to, I mean, it's a responsibility that you have to undertake, and we have to make sure that you understand that it's sticking to the schedule, coming in for your study visits. And, you know, there's always wiggle room, of course, if you're sick or on vacation, there's, you know, it's built in that if we have to go a few days late or a few days early, but the goal is to try to be as detailed as possible to do it. So it sounds to me like the successful study participant is somebody like Susan or Lauren. Lauren, the way you were describing, I'm pretty sure the study that you were speaking of is a study that we are also running. I think it sounds like the AbbVie pump trial. That's not a study that I coordinate, but my colleague Allie does. And what she has said to me about that study is it's very, very hard work for the study participant, as Lauren, you can attest to. But she said to me, it's so well run, and it's the most complex, and it's the study she likes the most. And you know, she's got every hope that it's going to help people. So so it's people like you and people like Susan who are willing to undergo the complexities of a trial and willing to deal with, you know, the unexpected. Lauren, you mentioned bruising, you mentioned infection. Susan, you didn't mention it, but I'll mention it for you. There was some nausea at the beginning. And you know, you powered through it. I have, and we learned from this. There's another study that I'm running where the participant experienced intense nausea and felt it was in her best interest, and we agreed to discontinue. But we learned from that. Now I can say to future people, you might experience this kind of nausea, and we can do something for it. So the medication that was given to her unfortunately did not work, but that's another story. So we do try to make you aware of all the risks going into it. And there may be risks that we don't know, that we don't anticipate. And study-wide, everyone keeps on top of that. There are reports that are submitted almost constantly from all around the world. So those are evaluated. What I was thinking of doing, if it's okay, I can talk a little bit about some of the studies that I coordinate, because there was talk about, well, I'm too far into my disease, so there's really nothing for me, or I'm on treatment and I've been on treatment, for 5-8 years, so I don't have anything. So I can just show you a few of the studies that I've done in the past, and a couple that I have currently. And by the way, Andrew mentioned PPMI, and I did want to piggyback on that a little bit, in that a number of our trials work with PPMI. For example, since PPMI requires DAT scans, oftentimes we can use that DAT scan for another trial, so it doesn't have to be duplicated or repeated unnecessarily. So people who are in PPMI, which again is the observational trial, can in certain cases participate in interventional trials too. And I'll go through one of them. So I'm going to try to share my screen. See if that works. Okay, so I'll go through that we talked about. So this was a study that it wasn't levodopa, it was a version of apomorphine, which is currently marketed as Apokin, which is given by injection. This was a formulated sublingual version. So it was produced on a film tab, kind of like, a mint film tab that you put under your tongue and it dissolves. And it was designed to bridge off time between doses of Sinemet. And it actually came to market not too long ago as Kinmobi. So it is very rewarding to see that the patients who were involved in the study, to see that it was helpful to them, and then to see that it was reproducible or across every site, and the FDA approved it, and now it's available. So that was a fun study to work on. This is this is a fun study. Susan knows all about this one. And this is for people who have been diagnosed within the past few years and are not on any treatment, or if they were on treatment, it was very brief, maybe 2 weeks or less. And it involves an injection of a medication that's currently on the market for diabetes. It's marketed as Betta, I think, and Vidaron. And it's given, but this is a slightly reformulated version that's given by injection once a week. And it's not really designed to relieve symptoms, although that's great if it happens, but it's to see whether any symptoms come along if they're slower, and it sort of delays the onset of new symptoms. So that one is ongoing. And it's a busy study. It's you're trained, if you qualify, you're trained to basically inject yourself, draw up medication from a little tiny vial with a little tiny needle, and inject yourself with the medication is maybe half a teaspoon, and once a week into the abdomen. And then after that, the nice thing about this study is after you're fully trained, you can take the medication home and use it on your own for 2 months. And then the coordinator touches base with you every month, so that the visits spread out nicely. And it does involve a DAT scan at the beginning and a DAT scan at the end of treatment. Treatment for this particular study is about 9 months. And they are hopefully in the process of designing an open label study, because this one does involve a placebo. So Andrew and I are waiting eagerly, and so are many other people. So that's been one of our studies. And Andrew, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything about our Neuralise study.
You're doing great. I think that this point that you made about some drugs for Parkinson's, well, all the drugs we have for Parkinson's that are on the market are all to treat symptoms. None are to treat the underlying cause and to slow down progression. But when you talk about research, there are these two broad types of interventions. There are improvements on symptomatic therapy. That's sort of like the levodopa pump that Lauren was getting. And then there's drugs that are actually meant to slow down the progression to get at the underlying cause of Parkinson's. This is like, call this Neuro Protection. And that's what the Neurali study in theory is about. It's a much tougher nut to crack, but obviously that this is really the main unmet need in Parkinson's therapy. So I think when you sign up for a trial, you're going to hear that you could either get symptomatic improvement or you might get disease slowing, which are sort of those are the two main sort of like broad categories of like objectives of these studies. And I think patients are really excited really about both, but especially about this idea about neuroprotection or disease modification. And there's a couple things I would say about it. One is that people expect to feel better when they're in a neuroprotection study, but what they're really going to happen is they're just not going to feel worse because it's not really meant to make you better immediately, but it's just meant to make you get worse or progress more slowly, or if in the best of all possible worlds, just stop getting worse entirely, to arrest the disease. And so people often don't notice anything at all because that's the whole idea, is for nothing to happen. But it's also, we've been trying to find a cure for Parkinson's, which is really what this is about, for years and years now. And it's really hard. So, but I think that obviously really worthwhile too. So anyway, Ellen, I went on much longer than I meant to, so I'll stop.
No, that's fine, because I wanted to tag onto that regarding neuroprotection. Was the study that we just finished. This was a very small pharmaceutical company who developed a drug called Posofin, which was designed to block 3 toxic proteins. So they tested it for people with Alzheimer's and they tested it in people with Parkinson's. They did say that it was for, quote, early PD, but that was a very loose term. We had a couple of participants who I believe had Parkinson's for 10 years and were on treatment. It was a short but very intense study. They enrolled, it was a phase 2, an early phase 2. So enrollment across all sites was only 42 participants for this, this subset that we did. And treatment only lasted for 25 days. And it did involve a number of LPs. So we are waiting to hear the results of that. We had 3 participants and 1 noticed nothing and 2 noticed improvement. So we don't know. This particular study was designed not so much for efficacy, but for safety. They were looking for the lowest dose, the lowest and safest dose. So it did not involve a placebo, but it did involve being randomized to 1 of 4 different doses. And that was the blinded part of the study. Patients didn't know what they were on and we didn't know either. So at this point, we're just waiting to hear, but that was different, for example, than the previous study I talked about, where this one was 7 weeks long and the other one is total of almost a year. So another study I wanted to mention is for symptomatic relief. And this is a study called Tempo 1, which is for people with early Parkinson's who can be on MAO-B inhibitors. So not levodopa, but medication like selegiline, rasagiline. It's not an injection like the Neurali study. It involves taking 3 capsules once a day for 6 months. So this we're currently recruiting for this study, and it's been interesting so far. We don't know yet, but this is a different design than the previous 2 studies. This involves a placebo versus a medication called tavapadon. So those were some of the studies that I worked on. We have many more, and like we said, there's one for everybody. There's the observational ones, there's the interventional ones, there's the pump, there's DBS studies, there's medication studies, There's for people who are experiencing off time, people who are advanced and have some cognitive issues, people who are more advanced than that and have hallucinations or psychosis. So we really take all comers, and it's wonderful to see how people volunteer their time and their energy, and hopefully it'll lead to something positive in the near future.
And thank you, Ellen. I want to say also it's important, I think, in the centers they deal with, is that your slides? You can take them out now, Ellen, unless you have more.
Nope, I'm
Oh,
good.
yeah, we're back. That you make yourself known in your, if you're in a large Parkinson center. It's sort of like they have lots and lots of patients, and it's very hard for them to call through and say, oh, let me contact this person forward, let me contact that. I think it's really important to make yourself known that you are available for certain studies, because then it's not like you're waiting to be asked to dance, at your junior high. It's like you're out there on the bandstand saying, come dance with me. And that's how they know who you are. There's some studies I've been declined from, which is always hard on my ego that my body's not whatever. But yeah, make yourself known that you are willing to explore certain studies. I have Andrew and Ellen mentioned phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Personally, I'm much more leery of a phase 1 study than I am a phase 2 or 3 study for myself. I did turn down a phase 1 study, but that was partly because it was so far from home. And I had a long talk with Andrew and with the person who's our genetic doctor at Penn, and they were very generous with their time. One, I think they would be anyway, but two, it's because they know who I am through my activism and my being available for the other studies they've been made available. They spoke with me at length about the study, and I decided to turn it down, but with great professional advice, not just my son and my husband, who say, whatever you want to do, mom. And and I think that's very important, but it's up to you to make that connection. They have thousands of patients. And if you want to be involved, let them know you want to be involved. And don't just say it once, check in with them, check in with your doctor every 4 months or every 6 months when you see them, check in with them. Let them say, what's up? What can I be around for? And that's it.
Okay. We have
Sharon?
a couple of questions in the chat. One was about reimbursement for mileage, and the second one was about if you participate in a drug trial, do they take you off your regular medication? And I know Ellen had answered that, but if you want to elaborate on either of them, please go ahead.
Regarding reimbursement for things like mileage, travel, food, if it involves an overnight hotel stay because you have to be in the clinic early in the morning, it really depends on the study and the sponsor and how the study is designed. Typically, when you participate in a trial, you do get reimbursed for every visit you complete, and it's not supposed to be a bribe. It's just supposed to cover expenses and your time. So say, for example, every time you complete a study visit, you're given $50. So that is supposed to cover meals, parking, transportation, things like that. Other studies, if they involve a hotel stay, it gets a bit more complicated. There could be a concierge service, and then the pharmaceutical company bills to the concierge, or you may be required to give the coordinator receipts, and then, like, for example, you give me receipts and then I would submit them, and then you would be reimbursed that way. But usually most studies are designed so that there's no charge to you for any of those things. So
But I'm not going to Mexico off the amount of money I made on the study.
right.
That's it. Although I still buy the
not
coffee.
going anywhere close.
Yeah, I still buy the coffee, right, Ellen?
Right. So thank you.
Yeah.
I had one participant who saved up all the reimbursements and she bought a replacement window. So it's a window. So she bought a window. I think there was another question about the possibility of being taken off your current medication.
Right.
If you participate.
Yeah.
So again, it's so dependent on the trial and what the drug is being studied and if there are known interactions with any of your medications. So sometimes there's what's called a washout period, where whatever you're on, you have to be off of it for at least 2 weeks prior to the start of the study. Other medications, if there's a known interaction or it'll interfere with the study results, you'll have to come off of it, for example, for 3 months. Some medications that you're on or you've ever been on, it will disqualify you for even participating in the study at all. So it's so dependent on each study. It varies.
Okay. Any more questions? Lauren?
I have a couple of comments. I just wanted to tell everyone what Susan said about them being really nice to you. They were over the top nice. They want you to succeed. They know that you're putting in a lot of effort. I thought the very first day when I got the bruising, I thought, oh, crud, I've had an adverse effect. I'm out of it. I put in all this time. They worked with me for a month on trying to resolve these issues. You know, let's try putting a bandage on it to hold the cannula still under your skin. They even changed the protocol a little bit, which I didn't know that they were allowed to do. Instead of changing my injection site every 3 days, I was doing it every day. I was taking the pump off for exercise. So they really, really want you to succeed. I don't know if it's just because the study I was in was very complex, and I think they had trouble even getting people through the screening process. So they really want you to succeed. But the other thing was, when, I don't know if this is common, but when I was in there, I so wanted to talk to those people that were designing the study for things like the placebo pills, or I don't know if they're placebo or not, but they were little gray capsules that were not little. The shape of them, they were hard to swallow. They were big. And I was like, this is for people with Parkinson's. And some of them have swallowing issues. Like, they're used to these little tiny yellow cinnamon pills. Make the pills smaller, you know, just things like that. So I gave all sorts of opinions when I was down there, and they would write them all down and pass them on for me. But anyway, just my thoughts on it.
Good for you. Thank you.
Oh, and on the reimbursement, there was reimbursement, but I didn't realize that they would cover a hotel stay for me. I had to get down when I got the pump. I had to be off my meds for 12 hours. And I said, oh, I don't want to drive that far when I'm off my meds. I'll just stay in San Diego overnight. And then they said, oh, we'll cover that for you. So it was all taken care of. It was great.
Marcia, you had a question?
I have a comment and a question. I want to reiterate what Susan said. The lumbar punctures are not a big deal at all. I think I was less affected than you. The thing that affected me the most was they take a skin biopsy from. It took me a while to recover from that, but I love PPMI. I love being in these studies. My neurologist at Columbia, I have a LRRK2 mutation, so I'm in PPMI 2.0. You too? And my neurologist at Columbia happens to study LRRK2. So every visit, I'm constantly giving my bodily fluids and they must look at the schedule the night before, because they will call up and say, are you coming in tomorrow? Will you do this study or that study? Or my husband's a control. Can your husband come in? So I think that's really great. Unfortunately, this neurologist who I love moved to Israel, and I need a new neurologist. And I am debating about, I love being at Columbia because it's a center of excellence. But, you know, going local might be a little bit easier, but then you don't, the local guys that I've been to don't have access to these studies. I guess then you're on your own to find things from Fox Trial Finder, et cetera.
Where do you live?
Stamford, Connecticut.
Oh, so
It's only
you
an
could
hour
go.
for me to go to New York.
Yeah. So you could go. You could continue to do PPMI.
Oh, I'm
at,
doing that. I do that in New Haven.
You can do it in New Haven, exactly. Yeah, with Dr. Russell.
Yes, I'm doing it with him.
And
I've done
good.
some studies at Yale. Some other studies.
And they're good local neurologists, like in Greenwich. Fine.
I've seen some, you know, some, but the Dr. Rusk, for example, doesn't really have access to any of these studies. When I asked, that's how I got to Columbia, because I wanted to participate.
Yeah.
She wasn't like plugged in.
Yeah, if you lived on the Jersey side, you could come down and see us, but it's a little far.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do a wrap up and then we can stay on and do questions, continue the conversation afterwards for as long as you want. So let me just share my screen for a minute because it is 11, we're after 11. Okay, so the next 2 weeks, we're going to have chat sessions. So next week is going to be an open mic chat. Any topic is, it's up to you. We had our first chat last week and it was a lot of fun. So Shelley Savoy and Darlene Santos, who met each other through our Sunday morning program and have become friends, decided to do this together. And then the following week, Amy Carlson is going to be doing another chat session on creativity and Parkinson's. So that one should also be a lot of fun.
Be the 3rd, not the 5th.
So what?
Sunday is October 3rd, not October 5th.
Did I put the wrong date? Yeah, okay, October 3rd, I'm sorry. And then the next regular Sunday morning program, we're going to have Qigong with Bianca Mole. And I know that several of you people are interested in Qigong. It's supposed to help a lot. I have not done it, but I'm looking forward to it. And then we have a few open Sundays in between. So if anybody's interested in hosting a chat session, let me know. Any topic is fine. You know, we can do it. You can do a topic. You can do an open mic, however you want to do it. And I will explain. You know, I'll be in touch with you and give you tips on how to run it. But future programs, we have Laura Russell will be talking about her book, Exquisite Warriors, which Susan and I are both in. We have ballroom dancing and something else I can't remember, but those are in November and December. So I've got some really interesting programs coming up. And next, at the end of the month, we have, let me see, Moving Day LA. I know there are Moving Day walks going on all over the country this month. So if you are in the LA area and you want to join my team, please let me know and I will get you join Team Twitchy Woman. And we'll have a lot of fun. It's October 30th, so dress up in costumes. As you can see, here I am with my son Marilyn. This is from a few years ago, and it was just a lot of fun. And we'll have T-shirts for sale at the walk. And that's the end of my slides.